Alright, you guys, welcome back to part 3 with Josh, aka RIP. I know last time I left you on a cliffhanger. Promise let's do that this time. So here we go, the final part 3. Josh, RIP. Hawk has the biggest gamble of his life, and it comes up big. What happens?
He wins the lotto. So he's a huge...
Man.
He was always a huge gambler.
Yeah.
I'll just say it flat out. You know, he was a huge gambler. And anyway, he hit the lotto. And, he started really winning big, you know, and he kind of had a new lease on life when that happened. He was so happy. He bawled his eyes out, and I'm not going to go into the sum, but it was quite significant, and it really helped us at home because, you know, my brother's has a disability, and it's very hard to care for him, and so we were able to do certain things at home to make things more comfortable. But also for Pete, it was an opportunity to live his life, and Pete felt on top of the world, and then he kind of got stopped in his tracks and was diagnosed with cancer.
And how long between that huge moment of, hey, wow, we've struck gold here, and how long was that after that lotto moment had happened? Are we talking a couple of months here, a couple of weeks? How long was that?
I think it was a couple of weeks. I don't know. Right. I remember it was very close together.
Right.
And that we were all just shocked.
Mm.
And I remember my mum was just devastated. But
because they were married. They were married at this time, right?
Yeah, they were married, and I remember myself thinking that nothing could take him down, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I remember thinking, oh well, tough, you know, you'll be right. And I know that he was very scared. It was just a really weird time.
The initial diagnosis, if I remember correctly, and this is just paraphrasing because I wasn't there at the time. I didn't have the ground zero, so to speak, results and updated news because I was away. I wasn't at the company at this point, but I had heard on the grapevine that, hey, you know, there was conflicting reports whether he was healthy. We all heard he won lotto. That went around quicker than you could say. Well, I don't know, lotto. It was very much an overnight. A lot of the guys
that he had sacked from IPW still had the nerve to ask him to lend him money. That's how bad that was.
Wow.
Yeah,
I never knew that.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of guys in the industry would hit him up for money, and it was pretty sad, really, because they'd do nothing but slag him off because, you know, you wouldn't give him a push or something like that. But then when it came time to have some money, they just all relied on him, you know.
Yeah. That's a very strange mechanic to have. So he's been diagnosed now because I know he held on there for many years, long past the initial diagnosis, because wasn't the original diagnosis, I think, like a couple of months or something like that? They said, hey, you know, we don't know about this, but we're guessing it might be X amount of months. Is that am I reporting that correctly?
Yeah, they kind of gave him an approximation,
right?
Where I think they gave him a year,
right?
And,
okay.
No, it would be about 6 months. And he kept telling him wrong. He kept coming back. And which is awesome. And in that time, like with his money, he took my daughter, my oldest daughter, to New Zealand twice. Just him, my mum and her. And he took her to the snow and they spent time together. And he did a lot of really nice things. Yeah. And he also helped me, he just helped me out with things in the business, and whether he'll just go and buy something and bring it to me. You know, he just wanted to show that he loved us
during this time.
So, what's that?
Is this after he's gotten the diagnosis that he started to do these trips? He's starting to turn up. Yeah.
So he's got the diagnosis, and he's kind of got this new lease where he wants to live his life to the fullest.
Sure. Yeah.
But that was the perception, and so that's what everyone thought. Everyone thought that he was just living his life and trying to have a good time. But Pete was very scared. He He's very scared of going. And the hardest thing I ever heard him say was, and this is really hard for me to say, but he said that he's not going to see his baby girl grow up, which is my daughter.
Right.
And that broke my heart. That it was a really hard time. And so he was facing that mortality issue, and we really tried to get him to enjoy life. And then it got to a point where he started to deteriorate. The cancer was spreading. His lungs were affected. I remember one time, this is a completely different issue, but like he just had an attitude where it was like, fuck you, fate, you know, like you're not going to decide shit. And one day there was this guy working on our property. He had, wasn't a forklift. It was like a digger. And he's driving, full speed ahead. And Pete's walking across the lawn, and the guy's like, get out of the way, get out of the way. And Pete stares down the tractor or whatever, digger or whatever it is, and he doesn't move. And the digger drives into him and takes a chunk out of his leg, like a chunk of flesh. And he had to be raced to hospital because he was like bleeding out. Like he's lucky he didn't sever an artery. But Pete just had this attitude where, you know, no, fuck you. You don't decide shit. And, so that happened. And so he had to have a dressing on that done. At one point, it was every day he had to have this dressing repacked in his leg. So he'd have to drive all the way to the GP every day and get that done.
Yep.
And he still, even though he was so scared and so sad about this diagnosis, he just had he didn't want to be told what was happening to him. He was going to live his life to the fullest. And some of the times it worked, and some days he just had some really down days.
Yeah.
Where he knew he was feeling sick and things weren't right. Like he went through a chemo phase where, you know, he was vomiting a lot and he was just very sick. And my mum was just a saint. Like everything was for Pete, and her whole life was just caring for him. And my hat goes off to her because that was 3-4 years of her life where she was just 24/7.
Huge dose of respect and an absolute deep bow towards your mum for standing by him and sort of going through that, because first-hand experience, I'm not alone, but first-hand experience, that is a very, I wouldn't wish those kinds of scenarios upon anyone, to be not only there, but to be going through it and see someone that you care about that deeply be exposed to this terrible illness. But yeah, it takes a lot of inner strength to sort of stand tall with a smile on your face and let the person going through it going, hey, you know, we got this. So yeah, my hat's off to her as well. I mean, So did Hawk come down to the shows at all during this time, or was this very much a stay at home, we're not going anywhere kind of vibe? Because you said he was driving himself to the hospital for this dressing. So
yeah, he would. He actually came down quite a bit at one stage to the shows, and he got really into it. And I remember one thing didn't go well on a show. He had a rant about it on Facebook, like he was a fan, you know. So yeah, he did get into things quite a lot, but then he just got sicker and sicker. Yeah. And eventually, what happened was the grandkids were his life. Sure. My youngest was born in 2018. Wow. Sorry, I forgot.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And he was chuffed with that. And then he pretty much spent every waking moment with Troy, which is my brother, and me, and the two girls. Like, he spent a lot of time with the two girls. And then again, it was really hard for him as well, because he knew he wasn't going to be around. And my kids, for instance, at Christmas time, talking to him about next Christmas, and him knowing that he wasn't going to be around, and to see him try and put on a strong face and talk about it optimistically, it would have been so hard, and my hat goes off to him, because that just, it broke all of our hearts, and he still, put on that brave face. But anyway, his brain became compromised, so he had a bit of a delirium, a dementia, and because, again, this is what I work with every day, it was very hard to see someone in that position, because I knew exactly what he was going through, and it was very hard. He was very confused, and thinking he was in places that he wasn't, and becoming very paranoid, and anyway, so he had this general decline, and the girls tried to engage with him. And, a lot of the time children are great because they get a different reaction from people who are sick, They release that sort of endorphin of, it brings in a maternal instinct, or paternal. And Pete really responded to that. And, but yeah, he then one day he had a real bad episode at home, and I remember being called over at about 5 a.m.
Wow. Yep.
Yeah, and we ended up having to call an ambulance, and he was taken to hospital, and in that ambulance flash, he actually thought that you were the paramedic. Did you know that? No?
I'm kind of stunned because I've never heard this story in my life. No.
No, yeah, he actually, sorry, it's a hard time to talk about, but yeah, I should have told you, but he actually thought you were the paramedic looking after him, which I think is quite strange. After the paramedic would talk to him, and the paramedic was annoying him too. He was like, "Stop taking my bloody blood pressure." But he goes, "Is that Flashman?" I'm like, no, that's not Flashman. He's like, "Oh, he knows Flashman." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm sure he knows Flashman, Pete." And he's like, "Oh, good, he knows Flashman." And then that was it. But it was interesting. And but anyway, Troy and I have never been close, because he lives on the coast, I live in Brisbane, and we just have different interests in life, and I'm very much, wrestling and the girls and wrestling, and that's my life. And he's, got other things. So we were never close. But then him and I and my mum were with Pete in hospital, and he was quite unwell, quite confused, and it was very hard. And Troy and I just really supported each other, because we both knew that our hearts were breaking, and that he wasn't going to be around much longer. And we just tried to support each other as much as we could, and we really developed a bond.
Yep.
And we cried together and laughed together and tried to make a joke of the situation together. And it was really hard. And eventually I was there for 48 hours in the hospital, and I went and got my grandmother to come over and say goodbye, because one thing that people don't know is my grandma and him were best friends. She lived on the same property. They were best friends. They'd talk every day. So she got to say goodbye. And then I went and got my brother. And so I'm going backwards and forwards, and he said goodbye as well. And I went home just to get some sleep. And my mum gives me a call that morning and just said, "Look, he's gone. He passed away." And that was that sort of thing. He went quite peacefully. But I've always kind of been sad at the fact that he was scared at some points. And I'm kind of comforted in the fact that we were there to calm him down. Like there was one point, like my mum just had a way of just calming him down, even when he was completely of sound mind. I think you would have seen it plenty of times where she'd just give him a look and pat his hand or something, and he'd just completely calm.
Yeah, yeah. She had a wonderful way. I think we used to dub her the Pete Whisperer because if he went on like a bit of a rant or a tangent and was sort of, seemingly acting like a wild stallion, just kicking around and flailing around and being like, F this, F that, this is dumb, this is shit, she would sort of appear out of nowhere and be like, whoa, and just sort of calm him down, and then to the point of, right, what were we talking about? And it was just like that whole anger, that whole moment there where he was just lashing out was just forgotten because she would just calm him, and he's like, all right, moving on. And that was, she had a wonderful way with him. It's something that I've never witnessed with anyone else. Just this whole, I guess the best word is soothing. She was just able to just be like, okay, here you go, and just sort of wash over him, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful to see. And there were many a times where I'd come up to his house, and he'd be talking about the industry, and he'd sort of get fired up about something, and then she would do that. She'd be like, here's your tea, and he's like, oh, thank you. And then she'd be like, what are we talking about? Hulk's like, oh, I don't know, I can't remember now. What are we talking about? And then it wasn't forgetfulness. It was a case of, hey, I'm calm, I'm good. What are we talking about? Let's move on. And she was wonderful with him, man. But yeah, it
oddly enough, when he passed,
mm-hmm.
she calmed him down, and then he went, and he was holding her hand when he went, which I think is lovely.
Mm-hmm.
But that day he passed, believe it or not, was show day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the day of IPW wrestling, and I had no intention of doing it.
Sure.
And I know that a lot of people would be upset with me not doing the show, but I just wasn't up to it. I was a wreck. That morning, as soon as I got the call, I went there and said goodbye to him. And it was so hard. And I remember just holding him and, telling him how much I loved him. He always treated me as a son. And he would always, no one has ever told me how proud of me they are. Like no one has said, I'm proud of you more than Pete has. Pete always told me, how much he loved me and how proud he was. And he also gave me credit as a father. He just said, I'm so proud of what a good father you are, and look after my girls. And, he was just, anyway, so saying goodbye to him was so hard. And telling the kids was so hard. But anyway, we got this news, and we've said our goodbyes, and I'm ready to go home and just spend the whole day miserable. But then then my mum tells me that, no, you've got to do it. And I'm like, what? And she's like, no, you've got to do it. Pete would want you to do it. I'm like, Pete would definitely do it himself. You need to do this. And mum was pretty upset. She shouldn't have even put the energy into trying to convince me. She should have just mourned, But she just wanted me to live the legacy that he's left me, And so I went to the show, and we did the show, and I remember, I think it was Ash I spoke to in the canteen and told him what happened. And then there was Sweet Ass, and there was the guys that Pete really loved, I think I spoke to you on the phone, and it's just, a lot of people to tell. And then every show we do a speech, which I think most companies do. We do a speech of what's happening on the night. And so this was the hardest day of my life, really, because I was shaking the whole day. And, so I went and told everyone, and everyone was in shock, but we made it. So we weren't going to announce it on the night. And we'd go out there and just do the best show we possibly could. And it ended up being a really good show. and people really responded to it, and I wish I could have wrestled that show because like I was recovering from an injury. I just had knee surgery, but his spirit was definitely in the building. And then we had the funeral, and so many people came along and said goodbye to him, and I think it was really nice. And we had like 10 people get up and do a little mini eulogy on his life because there was just so many people who had stories and wanted to talk about him. And we had about 6 or 7 people come over from New Zealand. Lots of people from interstate came over, and it was just really nice. And then we did the tribute show to him. So because we didn't want to tell the audience the day that he died. It was too soon, we needed to mourn, and I wasn't ready to talk about it.
Yep.
And anyway, so we got all the roster out, and we were all wearing black armbands for Pete. And I got on the microphone and just talked about him, and we did the 10 bell salute, and it was really nice, and so many people. Actually, a lot of people were crying. It was a really nice moment.
Yeah.
And I think I could really feel his presence again. And I think one thing that would make him really happy now is that Troy and I talk every week. We're really close now. And, like there's not a phone call where I talk to him and I don't say I love you before I hang up, because that's how I was with Pete. And I made sure that every day I had with Pete after he got sick, just because I knew I was going to lose something big in my life, that I said I love you before I said goodbye.
Yeah.
And Pete was very much, he was a tough guy, but if you gave him a hug or a kiss or whatever, he really appreciated it. And I know the one way to make him cry is because I referred to him as a father, and if I ever did that, he would just start crying because it just meant that much to him to be that role in my life, and he very much was. But with Pete, the one time that I felt most spiritually connected to him was the reunion show, and you were there for that.
Yeah, I was there I was there at ringside for the 10 bell, where you guys had the boots in the ring for the 10 bell tribute show, the initial one. I was at ringside for that. But the reunion show, I made sure that, hey, first cab off the rank if need be. I was like, man, without question, I think I quite literally stopped what I was doing when that phone call came in. I think I was mid cooking and almost burnt my house down. But hey, this phone call was important. But yeah, definitely was there for that reunion show.
Yeah, it was a huge show, and a lot of the guys from 20 years ago came out of the woodworks to wrestle, and it was really nice. And we did it for Pete. And I had a match with Troy Cruz, and it was brother versus brother in a no disqualification match. And it was just billed as a huge match. And I'm not one to push myself in a company. I'm not one to give myself a title if I'm running the company. I don't like that, never have.
Yeah.
But I was planning the show, and in the locker room, at training, I announced the card of what the show was going to be. And Sweet Ass, Ash, Scorn, and a few other of the boys had heat with me. And I was wondering, like, I've never had heat with these guys before. Like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And I went there to talk to him, and they said, look, mate, you need to be main event. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you're fourth on the card. And I'm like, yeah, because there's a huge rumble that night, and the crowd's got to go home happy, and I think that'll be the best way to do it. And they're like, you cannot not be the main. And they said, trust me, when you get out there, you'll feel him with you. You need to be, in that main event spotlight for Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I come around to the idea, and we did it. And so Troy and I were both a mess. We're still very much upset about what's happened. And we spoke a little bit backstage, and we go to the ring. And I think before we enter the ring, we always flip each other off or fart on each other or whatever it is. But we go to the ring, and we're staring each other down. And I'm whispering "fuck you" to him, and then he's calling me a fat prick or whatever, and under his mask. And we're looking at each other, and we're like, this is for Pete. And we're staring each other down, and we could see into each other's souls. Like, we could see the hurt in each other. We really could. And I think that, that's a real bond of a brother. And we did the match. And the funny thing is, the first move in the match, the real significant move, like we roll out of the ring, and he takes me down, and then he's supposed to hit me with a chair. And because of the mask, and because we have different lighting now, we've got really fancy lighting in our shows now, he couldn't see properly.
Oh.
So he hits me with the chair, and it was all steel. It was all the corner steel part of the chair. And what it did is it dug into my head and then took a chunk out.
Oh, wow.
And then what proceeded to happen, and I have this on camera, is it squirted out of my head like a Tarantino movie. And I have a very high pain tolerance. I can handle, most things, but like, I was just seeing this blood squirt out of my head like a fountain, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I had actually edit this out if you have to, but like, I had planned to blade in this match, and I had the blade, and the ref hands me the blade. And I just look at it, I'm like, oh, no, fuck this. I don't need it now. So I threw that away. We get into the match, and we're just beating the living hell out of each other. And I'm actually really fucking heated now. I'm really pissed off. And so I'm laying the hits in, and he's stiffing the shit out of me as well. And he gets me in the corner, and he puts my head between the ladder. And he slams the ladder, and my head is sandwiched in between the rungs. And so I hadn't had a chance to get my arm up safely. So what he then proceeds to do is a chunk of the back of my head gets taken out. And so the back of my head is bleeding as well.
Oh, no.
And it's chaos.
Yeah.
And we're continuing to fight. And then I remember Troy telling me that I was lying there next to him, because we'd both taken each other out. We're lying down for the double down. And I'm saying to Troy, because I'm heavily concussed now, I'm knocked the fuck out, bro. I'm knocked out. And then he said to me, all right, let's go home. And this is 10 minutes in, and I roll over, and I'm like, no, fuck you. And I punch him in the ribs as hard as I could. And then I start laying into him, like full on shoot fists to the head. And I went into survival mode, I suppose. And
right.
I then go for a big kick to the ribs, and I nearly kill him with that kick. Like, I think I would have broken a rib for sure, because he wasn't walking right for ages. And
Wow.
I kicked him real hard, and I took control. He puts me in this guillotine choke, and he's like, just slow down, buddy. It's okay. It's all right. I got you. We're going to be doing this next and this next. And I'm supposed to gore him through a table while he's got the sleeper on.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember to do this. No worries. I gore the table, and I'm seeing quadruple now. I think I see like 40 little muses. Actually, you went out there, were you?
Yeah, I was.
You were?
Yeah. I the plan was for me to come out and then leave, and then after I think the match got restarted and you started bleeding, I was like, okay, I'll get out there. But yeah, I came out for that first little segment, but I was definitely watching on the monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like, I was out of it. Anyway, I go to run as fast as I can, which isn't very fast, towards the table.
Yeah.
And I turn for some strange reason, and I break the whole table with my head exposed. So my head just goes through the table, And Troy turns and looks at me. He's like, "Oh, fuck." And he thinks I'm dead now because my head's just been put through the table and nothing has affected him. And anyway, we eventually were on top of it would be a 16-foot ladder. Right. And he spears me off the top of it for the finish. And as I go down, somehow I twist in the air and I end up on top of him through a table. But anyway, he still rolls me over and pins me. So it's a bit of a fuck finish. But at the end of it, like I'm no longer pissed for some strange reason about my head injury. Troy can't breathe properly, beating the absolute hell out of each other. Like we went to war together, like I was talking about before, you know?
Yeah.
I go to hit him with a chair while he's celebrating, and he turns around and he hugs me, and then I drop the chair. And
now, was that moment planned or was that a shoot?
That was planned.
Yeah.
It was planned, but us talking to each other that whole time with the hug definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
And like we were having a full-on conversation while hugging each other and telling each other how much we loved each other and how much we miss him and all that sort of stuff. And what Troy didn't know is, like, we're both pretty emotional. Like, he's bawling his eyes out. I'm almost, I wish I had the ability to cry, but I think I was slowly dying. But yeah, what he didn't know is I had planned to play Hawk's music at the end of the night while we're both in the ring. Yeah, his music plays, and then he looks at me and he says, "Oh, you motherfucker." And he really starts bawling, and we're both pretty upset. And I felt that Pete's spirit is present. And I'm not a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person, but I felt he was like hovering over us. Like there was a cloud of him over us, where he watched that whole match and he loved it. And just that emotional presence was there. And I'll never forget that memory because, you know, I think of him every day. I miss him every day. I still, you know, like I still kiss my hand and touch his picture, you know, and
sure.
I think of that moment because that was my way of communicating with him. I remember I got really sick one day and I was dehydrated and I was seeing things from being so sick.
Wow.
And I spoke to him.
Yeah.
I saw him and I spoke to him and I said goodbye to him. And it was really beautiful, you know, and I think that match with Cruz was what really summed up Pete's wrestling career, my wrestling career, Troy's wrestling career, like the Ball wrestling legacy, you know, was a love for the business, killing each other for it, but there being that underlying love as well.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we left it all in the ring.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'll always treasure that memory.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of being invited back to not only be a part of that show, but to witness that match from ringside for a little bit as Mini Cruz, and then watching them on the backstage. And yeah, man, I don't know about the younger guys, but there was a lot of guys that started when Hawk was around from yesteryear to up to my time, and then onwards when he was still active as the boss of the company. And yeah, there was not a single person either not standing up and clapping or not a single dry eye in sight, because we all...
Yeah, there was a lot of tears, yeah.
We all felt that way, man, that basically what you just said is how we all felt as well.
Yeah, well, when I got to the back and like I could barely walk and the whole dressing room was there clapping. And that's the sort of family that Pete wanted, you know, that's what we are about. That's a real credit to the roster that we have, even, you know, to present day, because they knew how hard that was for me. They knew how hard it was for me to run the show the day he passed.
Yeah.
And, they don't always tell me that they appreciate it. I know that they do. I know that they appreciated that moment that we shared in the ring, you know, and that they knew what it was about.
Just being outside of that company when that word hit social media of his passing, I think I found out on the day. I'm not sure whether it was from you, either from a call or a text, or from someone of the other guard sending a text saying, hey, you know, this happened. But
yeah,
I do remember finding out, I think, pretty sure the day of, and my own recollection was I went outside and I kind of just looked at the sky and I just sort of cried because there was so many times for me when I was coming up through IPW that I was having a lot of personal demons, both with myself and with my relationships and to some extent the business at that time. And Hawk was very much this is how it is kind of guy, and not in a bad way. It was just the kind of thing where it was like, do you want to fix it or do you want to go through it and then come to me and we'll fix it? And that was just the two avenues you could have. It was a case of, like, he would always put it his way, which was like, shut the fuck up. This is how you fix it. And it was like, oh, okay. And sometimes it was the boot in your ass that you needed. But other times when you were kind of still going through your own things and it was too soon, he would say, and you didn't react, he's like, that's when he would go, all right, talk to me. Because he would always pick up on the differences. And that was something that resonated with him forever. So when that call came down, I remember sitting there and having my own little moment. And then I think once it hit social media, I rang up the boss of the wrestling company I was working with at that time, and I said, dude, I don't want to make this a part of the show. This is not going to happen. No, we're not going to play the start of the show and then do this as a segment on the card. No, I said, but I don't care what you say, because I was in a position of doing the creative and helping with the writing as well as doing the production, similar things that I would do down there with IPW. But I remember saying to him, man, we have to pay tribute to him, and it's not even a question. I said, we're doing it. And credit be, within 2 seconds, okay, yep. I expected this call. Yep. You tell me you do it. You let me know how you want to do it and we'll do it on the day. And I went, great. And it took me 10 minutes. I called him back. I said, right, this is what we're going to do. And I think the start time for the show was about 6:30. And before the video played, before anything started, we turned the sort of, the music of fans coming in, buying tickets, whatever. Similar thing that IPW does, have the music on before the show starts. We pulled the volume down, sent all the roster out there. Everyone wore a black armband. Even interstate guys that had never met Hawk was like, yeah, sure. I've heard his name. I'll do it. There was a few guys there that weren't with the roster at that time, myself included. And the guys that started with Hawk, with IPW, we stood in the ring. We formed a little group, a little line, and the rest of the roster surrounded ringside. I made a graphic similar to, in remembrance with Pete's face in the circle and things like that. And I said a few words. A couple of other guys said some words, and we did the 10-bell salute. And it was really surreal because I think at that moment it was such a desensitizing experience, because I think all of us had been exposed to memorials on WWE programming where it was like 10 bell and you're like, oh, this sucks, and they play like a video package and you go, oh, this is terrible, and then the whole show is a tribute to them, that kind of vibe. But to have it be of someone that we knew and have it be of that person that arguably started it all up here, I don't think it really hit the guys outside of the immediate family. So yourselves obviously were going through that whole process for X amount of years. But for the guys that weren't at home, and I call IPW my home because that is where I started, and I've always valued that as my extended family, my home. So for the guys that weren't home, I think a lot of them, it took, I think, maybe a week or two. And I think I would sort of get drip-feeded messages after a week or two going, and it was just fragmented messages. It wasn't like the conversation we've had now. It was sort of things like, fuck, he's really gone.
Yeah.
Like things like that, where it sort of was like, oh shit, although it was real at the time, it was just sort of that thing where it was like, oh, now it's just hit me. But I made sure to do that, and I'm really glad we did, because it wasn't anything to showboat. It was just literally the fact of, hey, this has happened in our industry. We weren't sure at the time if you guys had made reference or not, but we thought, well, a lot of us at that time had started with him, and we didn't want to ignore the fact. We thought, this place, these people, this crowd, this whole environment would not exist if it wasn't for him, and it would be insulting to ignore that fact.
Yeah.
And that's all it was coming from. It was just a respect thing, an absolute salute, and then the show continues. It just had to be done. It wasn't even a question. And I'm glad we did, because at the end of the night, a lot of us that started at home in the locker room, we kind of sat next to each other, and that was that sort of unspoken look at each other like, shit, we couldn't say anything, but it was very much a case of, whew, just like it was just a shaky, weird vibe. But I'm glad we did do that, because in the crowd that night, unbeknownst to me until after the show, was Sweet Ass and Jace the Ace. And I managed to speak to them for not as long as I wanted, because obviously, people were leaving and it was a post-show kind of vibe and everyone needed to get home and whatnot, what have you. But I remember hugging them and seeing them, and it was just a case of, that was needed. That felt right. To then get to the memorial with all the guys there, again, it didn't. It felt like it was a reality to me at that point. I think the memorial show, in February, where the Boots were in the ring, and seeing his boots and knowing full well that when I started, I think one of the first images I've had of IPW on my first show, coming in with Blaze and going into the locker room for my first time, was going past that little dressing room in the Bicentennial Center with the makeup mirror, and hearing this, "Oh fuck," and then looking past, and there's Hawk being wrapped in barbed wire with those boots on, and I'm being like, shit. And then I said to Blaze, I'm like, what the fuck, man? What is this place? Because that was the first thing I saw coming into that locker room, was just him wrapping himself in barbed wire. Yeah. So seeing those boots again after such a huge amount of time, I was like, okay, damn it. Like that kind of like, it's starting to feel double real now. So when we got to the memorial, I think that was such a unifying moment for everyone. And I think a lot of us there, without question came for Hawk, but I think a lot of us there came for you guys. Susan, you, Tim, Troy, everyone, like all of your family, extended family, in-laws, everything. We just came to say that any grudges that were from his side or from our side or whatever happened, any bad blood, any arguments, all the good times, all the bad, hey, it was what got us there. And we wouldn't be in the position professionally and be the people we are on a personal level if it wasn't for his guidance. And it felt like a very solemn, but obviously saddening, but it felt very unifying, if I can use that term, because everyone sort of banded together, everyone was grieving together, but we all knew that together we would all remember and we would all begin to mourn, but we would also all begin to heal together. And I think, I'm sure there's a lot of people down the line that, have sent their words of praise, words of remembrance, that, could or couldn't be there and not on that day. But
it showed how many lives he touched.
Oh, man, it really does. I mean, only the other night, and this is a shoot, only the other night was I going through, given the state that the world's in right now, a lot of people are resorting to streaming services for entertainment, Netflix, YouTube, all that stuff. I got a big box here full of DVDs, and this is for real. I found all the matches that I had, all the shows rather, that I had edited from 2012 to 2013 when I left. But I'd also found Major Impact 2, 3, and 4.
Oh, they're great, aren't they?
That I was able, I think when I first started in the production side of things there, Pete said, can you do anything with this? And he almost quite literally threw the VHS tapes at me. Like, well, I can't do anything now. You're throwing them at me. Hurry up. And I remember converting those to DVDs. And
do you remember the birthday one where we all surprised him in the ring?
Yeah, I remember coming to you. the show name was Hulk's Birthday Bash, and I remember designing the poster for it with the eagle. But I remember coming to you, I think it was at the end of the show, or maybe it was just before. But I do remember talking to you afterwards. But I think I just came to you and I said, "Hey man, can I speak to you?" And I pulled you outside. And I said, and I remember showing you my gear bag, and you're like, "What?" And I said, "I've just bought this." And straight away you got it. You're like, "Awesome." And I was like, "Do you reckon at the end of the show?" And you're like, "Oh, of course." And I'm like, do you reckon he'll appreciate it?" And he goes, "If you had told him that you were doing this, he'd say no."
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
But because you've done this on the fly, then yeah, he's not.
That footage though of us all in the ring and trying to coax him into the ring to celebrate and all that. We used that in the package to promote myself versus Cruz and the reunion. And you could see the love and the tears in his eyes and the huge smile.
Yeah.
And it really is, credit to how much he loved, wrestling and the boys, He was still one of the boys, he'd piss a lot of people off. And he'd fuck around a lot and all that, but he still had a relationship with a lot of the guys.
He did
on the roster, and they had every reason to, dispute how he was booking them, especially in the end because he started to lose touch, But really, like, he was still one of the boys, and there was always that underlining love. And if there wasn't that underlining love, then it was usually myself culling them out of the business, Yeah. It'd be me addressing it and saying, "Oh, you have some freaking respect or I will slap the shit out of you." And
I remember when that footage got filmed and I made the highlight reel recapping that Hawk's birthday show, and I had that clip there in slow motion of him smiling, and I went, "Yes, I finally got you smiling." And I remember quoting that footage to him all the time, and I was like, he'd always sit there and he was very stern, but it wasn't from an angry thing. That's just how he was built. That's just how he was raised. He was a very stern, stoic kind of guy, very intimidating. So when you didn't know him, it was like, shit, is this dude going to like wear me as a shirt in 5 minutes? Like you never quite knew. But hey, once you broke that mold, it was heart of gold. So he used to always have that stern thing, and I used to, he would be like this with everyone. He'd always rip people or say some sort of sideline comment. You'd go, "Damn it, I wish I didn't tell you that." Something like it was an in-joke between you and him that you generated from a couple months ago. And I remember that show came out, and he was sitting there stoic, and I said, I think it was down at the PCYC where we used to train, and I said to him at one point, he was sitting there stoic, and I said, "You don't have to be like that anymore." And he went, "What?" And I said, "The crossed arms, the frowning thing." and he goes, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And I went, "I've got footage of you smiling now." And he goes, "Fuck you, you little shit." And I used to always say that. I'm like, I've got footage of you smiling. Like every time he was getting angry or something was annoying him at shows, I would come up and say that in his ear. And then he would try and grab me and give me the whole punch in the nose kind of thing. And then he's like, "That footage ever gets released, I'll kill you." And I'm like, "Hey, Hawk, have you seen the DVD?" And he's like, "It better not be fucking on there." I'm like, "It's on there."
Pete.
I remember I made one for him. He watched it and he rang me that night and he goes, "Fuck, I look good, don't I?" And I went, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Oh, that bit at the end where everyone got in the ring." He goes, "Fuck, I'll make everyone look good in that ring." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
He really thought he was hot stuff, eh?
Oh man, yeah, he's it's still, I still, much like you guys, man, I still feel his presence a lot of the time, man. I'm kind of in that belief, man, that it's that line from Men in Black. I don't know if it's if you've seen that movie in recent times, but there's a scene where they're driving upside down when they're in that supercar and they're going through the tunnel, and Tommy Lee Jones is listening to Elvis, and Will Smith goes, "Elvis is dead, right?" And he goes, "No, Elvis is not dead. He just went home." Yeah. I always think about that with Pete, where everyone's like, Pete passed away. No, he didn't pass away. He just went home. So I always sort of keep, I don't know why that quote came up in my head when he passed, but I think maybe it was the old country music thing that he used to love jamming to, but that it stuck with me where it was like, I don't.
Well, Pete loved Elvis too. Like, he was a huge Elvis fan. So
maybe that might have been it. I know he was into his westerns.
Yeah.
But
He loved dressing up as Elvis too. He used to dress up as Elvis back in the day.
never knew that, man. Never knew that.
Yeah.
But all right. RIP. We're getting to the end of the podcast now. We're about to head off into that sunset. Guys out there know you as RIP. I've always known you as Josh, and I've always known you as a straight shooter. So right now, we're going to straight shoot right into a segment I like to call a deep dive. This is where I ask you specific questions that only you yourself can give your own unique spin on, your own unique answer. So RIP, are you ready for the deep dive?
Let's do it.
All right, man. What was a turning point in your life? How did it affect you? And if it was negative, how did you overcome it?
Turning point in my life.
Yeah.
I would say the birth of my first daughter, Amelia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I just it changed my life in every sense of the word, because you appreciate everything more. You appreciate life. Yeah. You want to have that goal of being there for this little thing that's in your arms, and you've got to make sacrifices, and you've got to put in a lot of time to kids, and it just changed my whole outlook on life. I've actually, I don't know if it's a personality crisis or what it is, but I think I've just changed as a person completely.
Yeah.
Because I think it's toughened me up in a lot of ways, where you're putting this kid first, and you want to do anything you can to protect them from the harshness of life. And so I think, being a parent really, really changed who I was, and made me really appreciate life. And having a second kid only did that more for me. And I really feel lucky, and grateful for what I have, and family,
Yeah, it totally puts everything into perspective when that first kid gets born.
Yeah.
Hey, you've received a lot of advice, and you've given out a lot of advice throughout the years, but what was the best advice that you have ever received?
I'm not going to say where I heard it, but like, one of the things that's good advice is like, will it matter in 5 years?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
A personal issue with someone, and you come across that every now and then in wrestling, like, wait, listen, mate, I want to really slap the shit out of you. Mm-hmm. But you think to yourself, will it matter in 5 years, And
yeah,
if you have a quarrel with your wife, you think at the end of the day,
will it matter in 5 minutes?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Will it matter in 5 minutes? It probably won't, because marriage is that petty, So, like, I think that's a good advice. But I think another one is the people you piss off on the way to the top are the people you run into on the way to the bottom. And I think that's a really good advice, and it's advice that I give every single person who's wanting to be a wrestler. When they're about to go on shows or whatever, I usually say this to them, because you make enemies. It's just putting up roadblocks for yourself. You want to be as respectful as you can, and humble, and always look for improvement, But, you don't want to be making enemies in the business.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, man. All right, this is the part of the podcast now which I like to call the Lipton 6. This is in tribute of James Lipton, who sadly we lost earlier this year in March 2020. He was an American writer, lyricist, actor, and the dean of the Actors Studio Drama School at Pace University in New York City, where he hosted and ran his TV show Inside the Actors Studio from 1994 to 2018. So, in honor and tribute of him, I'm going to ask you his famous 6 questions that he would ask all his guests before wrapping up his interview. So, you ready? The Lipton 6.
Let's do it.
All right, man. First of all, what is your favorite word?
Vafongul.
For the people playing at home that didn't write that down, do you want to say what that word is?
It's pretty much a fuck you in Italian. I like it. I say it a lot, and people look at me strange.
All right.
It's just second nature now.
What turns you on? Now, it could be in the way you're thinking about, or it could be something that makes you happy or excited for life. Like, yes, that's happening. I'm pumped up and ready to go.
What turns me on?
Yeah.
Okay. Dudes. No, I think
dreaming of you naked.
Yeah. Peggy's Bananas. No, I think what really turns me on is honesty, but like blunt honesty.
Yeah.
Like, someone will be like, "Oh, you got a new hairstyle. That's great. That's great." And then one person will be like, "Oh, I don't really like it." And that's usually me in a crowd.
Right.
So I'm usually, I don't know. Have you ever watched Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Larry David really in those situations. Like, I'm very sociable. I want to be everyone's mate, but I also address the elephant in the room really quickly. So yeah, I'll be like, "Oh, well, that was a bit shit of you to do," you know?
Yeah.
And that turns me on. And so when I see other people who are blunt and dicks like me, I'm like, "Oh yeah, fuck yeah. I like that."
Do you have the theme song play? Like if someone walks in with a necklace and you go, "Oh, that's a shit necklace," and they go, "Oh, I just saved it from my house that burnt down." Dum dum dum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Hey,
story of my life, man.
so that's a very unique sound, but what sound or noise do you love?
Sound or noise that I love.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say the Curb Your Enthusiasm song because I hear it a lot. Like in my head, I hear that a lot.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt? Now we'll do real life because you run the business, so real life. If you weren't working in the medical field, what would you like to do if you weren't doing that?
Organized crime.
Yeah?
Yeah, honestly, I'd like to be in the mafia. I really would.
Okay.
I think I'd be a good Don. And I think because Pete was always called the godfather of wrestling.
Yeah, he was.
And the way he ran things was like the mob. And I think I've learnt all right. So, yeah, I'd like to be a gangster. But I guess in an immediate, maybe mental health, further work in mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, improving their lives.
Yeah. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I don't know. Shit. Sup, bitches? I don't know. Yeah, I'd like God to be a really relatable dude. Like,
yeah,
you know, I'd really be happy if like I get to heaven and it's Al Pacino.
Yeah.
And he's just like, "Come with me," you know, like, yeah, that'd be a happy ending for me.
All right, man. Speaking of a happy ending, we're going to hit that NOS. We're going to slam on that pedal and we're going to drive towards the finish line, Vin Diesel style, as we slam our way towards the final four. First up, was there ever a point in your life where you thought, "Hey, this isn't going to work. This might not be for me"?
There's been matches where I've gone out into the ring and I've like, this is not for me. This match is off to a really bad start.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to continue this match. And then I remember like one of these matches I got dropped on my head and I was just like, "Oh, I'm done with this match." So I clotheslined the guy and he shit himself, you know? So
it's one way to stop.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was done after that.
Or maybe as a follow-up question, have you ever stopped and thought, "Man, how the hell did I get here?"
Yeah. Working in aged care,
right.
You find yourself looking after these elderly people, and whether like you take them out, and these are people with high care dementia, and they end up in the ladies' room, and I'll run into the ladies' room and try and wrestle them out of the room and say, "Oh, let's go this way, let's go this way." And all these women are looking at me mortified. That's how I kind of think sometimes, like, how the hell did I get here in life?
Yeah.
But I've since moved up the ladder and I'm doing all right for myself. But yeah, sometimes in aged care you get put in these positions where, it's compromising.
Yeah. At this age, the age you're at now, take me back to when you first started wrestling, when you first on those ring. Did you ever think back then, at the age you're at now, that this is where you'd be?
No, I didn't think I'd live this long, honestly. Just the way I was wrestling at one point.
Right.
Yeah, no, like, because we were doing weekly shows, taking chair shots every night, and luckily wrestling's kind of changed. But no, I did not think it would be a family business where I was running things.
Right.
I just was under the impression that it would always be Hawk, and yeah.
All right, man. Final question. Currently, what is your proudest moment or achievement?
Proudest moment or achievement?
Yeah.
I'd say it's not a singular moment, but, those two, having those two kids to call my own kids.
Yeah.
And I sometimes I'm sitting down in the lounge and, my wife's, lying on my shoulder and I've got these two kids running around and I just think, this is really nice. But also I'll say real moment of pride is, the way Troy and I took care of things that night for Pete. It gave me a lot of closure and it helped me heal a lot of wounds,
Yeah. I feel you, man. But yeah, so family for you, proudest moment.
Yep.
All right, man. We've gone through your combined history of you and I. We've gone through your history not only as a wrestler but as a person. Hey, before we hit off into that sunset, where can people find you on social media? Where do we find IPW stuff? And where do we get in contact with you?
Okay, so like our Facebook page, IPW Australia. We also have a fan page. But yeah, like us on IPW Australia. Feel free to send us a message if you have any training inquiries, anything like that. We'll get back to you right away. We do shows on the first Saturday of every month. Doors open at 6:30. The show starts at 7.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, down there at William Duncan in the ring.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you for helping me there.
All right, man. RIP, thank you so much for coming on board today, giving me your time, sharing some memories, sharing some moments. And hey, I'm damn sure happy to have known you and continue to know you all these years later. I'm proud of the transition you made from not only as an early performer, learning to wrestle, but giving that arduous task of taking over the business, handling the situations that went down post-transition, and still coming out with a smile on your face and running those monthly shows for all those guys and girls. I know it means a lot to them, and you mean a lot to us. So from the bottom of my heart, man, thank you for sticking through it and being who you are today. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Flash.
All right, man. I'll catch you down the road.
All right. Take it easy, man. See ya.
And there you have it. That's it. That's the complete 3-part series with Josh, aka RIP, the IPW Australia owner. Thank you so much for listening in to this 3-part series. Don't worry, next week we still got plenty of guests. Next week we'll have another legend on the podcast. Make sure you hit up LMBC Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you next week.